Hello, I'm Lihao. So Lapidotary has asked question on Twitter, and you know what is it? It's Svelte question time. You have questions, I have answers for you. So the question for this video is from Lapidotary. Hope I called your name correctly. So Lapidotary asked me this question on Twitter, which is how do you communicate across two components without using store, without using context, without using props? How do you get two components to communicate with each other without store, props, or context? So we're gonna find that out. So the question itself may sound odd, but itself it is not uncommon. So I can give you a few examples. For example, number one, you are building an e-commerce site. You have a list of items in your screen, and at the top right corner you have a shopping cart. So every time when you click buy on some of the items, you want it to update on your shopping cart. So the item cart and shopping cart, they are not directly linked to each other. They are not parent-children or grandparent-children relationship. So context or props is definitely out of the way. Sometimes you don't have a shared data across them. For example, shopping carts use some cart information, cart data. Item cart is a different kind of data. So there is no direct link where it doesn't make sense to share data across them, right? So how do you communicate between these two components? This is what we are interested to know about. Let me give you another example. Say you are building an accounting web app. You have your balance sheet and maybe income statement on one side. So every time when you change something on the balance sheet, you want your income statement to reflect as well. So they may not, again, they are maybe like siblings, but they don't have direct relationship. They don't really share the same data. But anytime when you make some changes on one side, you want the other side to get notified, fetch data, and then show the updated data. They don't really have a direct component hierarchy relationship, as well as they don't really share data. So in this sense, you don't use props or context to share data, or you would not use store to share data across them as well. This is what we're going to explore in this video, how we are going to communicate across components without using props, store, or context. So here I prepared an example using the first example that I've said, which is a shopping e-commerce platform shopping cart example. So here I make things easy. I prepared two components. One is items, one is a cart. So we want the two components to communicate with each other. So over here, items, I look through an array and display items which have buttons. When you click, call or buy something. Okay, and in the shopping cart, you have a cart information. So this cart information is very simple. I'm just going to show you loading or either the last update variable. So every time when I simulate a fetch, I will just update this last update variable with the latest timestamp. So you will see that the time will change. Okay, so now we have our cart, which is a cart data. So currently, this cart data is a store where I have where my cart is using it. So every time when I mount this cart component, I initialize it by fetching the latest cart data and assigns to the store. So over here, I also use a store to display the data. So now, for now, I'm in my items to whenever I click buy something, I want to simulate updating the data. So this way, I'm sharing across using a store. So I'm fetching data and update the store, which we want to change this. This does not feel natural, right? Why would your item cart be fetching your shopping cart information, right? Why would your item be fetching a shopping cart information? That does not make sense. To demonstrate the whole app, how it works, I'm going to click the buy me and you'll see that it will get updates after 1 second. So whenever we fetch this data, you'll see that we simulate the fetch by waiting for 1 second and then we update return a new timestamp. So here we want to change this. We want to refactor this code in a sense where we don't want to allow anyone else to just change this store data, right? We want this store to be just to be contained itself, to be owned by this shopping cart and not being changed by anyone else. So the first thing we want to do is we're gonna export a function so that anyone can call this function to represent that this is like the API from the cart component. Anyone calling this function is telling the shopping cart that, hey, something has changed. I'm going to create a function called notify cart changes. So we're going to have this function that anyone can call in anywhere, and this is how we're going to communicate from the items component. Right? It sounds simple, but bear with me. After we change this, we will see that how we nudge it in a direction that it makes sense, where you have a nice clean separation between the items component and the carts component. Right? So here we have a function called notify cart changes, which we want our items to just call this. Right? We should just call this. This buy something should maybe make like some buy, maybe buy item API or something, and then we'll notify cart changes. So this function will call to notify that, hey, something has changed. Tell the cart component that, hey, you should do something with it. Right? So it does not have to be buy item. So in a lot of different scenarios, different components, it works similarly, where you just make some changes with your API and things like that, and then you notify other components, right? Say that, hey, you should fetch your latest data as well, get notify them. So we're going to call notify. So over here, you can see that we kind of clean up this item component where it has it got nothing, it has no idea at all what the cart's data is going to be. It's just going to say, it's just going to be one way notifying, hey, there's some changes, do something with it. Right? So over here in my cart component, all I need to do is to listen to all these changes. Right? I could listen to changes, or in this first example we're going to try out, it's going to make something easy, which is every time we have notify cart changes, we're going to call fetch latest cart data. Or I'm going to create another function called update cart data. Okay. So here is where we will gonna be calling a wait for get data equals a wait for this fetch latest cart data, and cart data dot set data. So here we're gonna call this updates cart data. Right. So on the cart side, nothing much change. So here what we changed is that we're gonna say, hey, you only notify me and I will settle myself on my site, right? So here everything still works, right? So one thing I doesn't really like over here at this point of time is that we're still exposing the carts data and fetch latest carts data. Although this is because we need to use it in the carts components, right? We need to import this too so that we can fetch carts data and then initialize something and things like that. Yeah, this is something I dislike, in a sense that we need to export this and someone else may accidentally import this function, fetch latest carts, carts data store and things like that, and may still modify the carts data directly. Right? So what we can do here is that there's two approaches to this. First is that maybe we create a carts external.js and we import where we import this, the only function that you want over here, and then we export this. So actually we can make a shorthand is just write this way. So this means that right now we probably can package up everything and say that from now onwards you can only import from cart external instead of importing from cart, right? So this is something that you can design your component package library or whatever you call, provide a nice API that only exposes API that you want to, and everything else is like private. Or I could show you another approach, which is more Svelte, in the sense where because this the functions we have is fairly simple. So why not I try to show you another approach that uses some features of Svelte, and so that you can learn that as well along the way. So here we can actually use something called a context module script. So if you are not familiar with context module, I've actually made a video about it, and you can watch that over here. So context module, we can actually copy almost everything from here and paste it inside context module. So what context module is that it is just whatever in here is just like a normal JavaScript module, right? You can define functions over here and anything else. And the cool part is that variables and functions that is defined over here can be accessed directly inside your Svelte component, and you don't even need to import them. So for example, now I can define cut data and fetch latest cut data over here, and I don't even have to import them, and they'll be just available for me. And I just need to export the notify cut changes, because that's the only thing that I want it to be public. So for items to import that, you can import from the cut.svelte component, but instead of the default import, we're gonna import name import. We're gonna name this notify cut changes, right? We're gonna import this. So let's try it out. Let's click. 1 second later, this changes, right? So everything still works. It's just that we shifted things around, make it more clean cut, where items components will only notify one way to tell the cut that, hey, something has changed, and the cut itself will handle will get notified and then fetch the data when it needs, right? So this is component communication without using a context, props, or store. There is a store involved, but you're not really accessing the stores. You're not changing a store directly, but you're calling some functions. So here is how I provide a clear API from one component to another, so that they can communicate in the sense that calling your component API to let you know something changes, and in that way you communicate across two components. Of course, there is also two-way or multi-way communications that we're gonna explore right now. But before that, if you find this helpful, please like my video. And if you want to support me even further, you can go to buymeacoffee.com and buy me a coffee. So I'm gonna fork out my repo. If you're interested to see the code that I've written previously, you can always find them in the link in the description down below. So we're gonna explore an alternative of just providing a function approach by extending this to make it more generic, in the sense where any function, any components can't notify each other without knowing who is on the other end when they're talking to. So let me give you a taste of how this would look like. For example, in a cut component, instead of all this, let me remove this notify cut changes for now. Instead of having all this, how about having a way that in a cut component you can, so in onMount, after we initialize, we can listen to changes that people will notify you. So for example, maybe come over here and say listen to cut changes event and act on it. So when I say act on it, literally act on it, you will call fetch latest cut data over here. So you'll fetch latest cut data and then update your cut. Okay, which is actually this function, update cut data, right? So you can listen to changes and then act on it. And on the other side, for items, you, instead of having to know like cut changes, then you can come over here and sorry, let me comment this out. So we're gonna say publish an event called cut changes. So the beauty of doing this is that now it is possible to have another component. I would say maybe welcome give components, which has similar listen to the similar events. For example, for cards changes. So welcome give component will be something like this, where you add a few you add a few items, and then I'll give you a gift, right? So maybe you also listen to cards changes, and then you figure out whether this user is worthy of a new gift or not. So here I can still listen to card changes and do something. So now what makes this approach different is that instead of having items to know who is on the other end listening to card changes, now you just notify that, hey, cards change. And all the components, for example, shopping cart, welcome gift, can listen to that event and act on it. Right? So this is what ultimately we want to achieve. So card changes in this sense would be maybe I'm just gonna make it easy. Say welcome equals to false, and then welcome equals to true when you add to cart. Maybe a counter. Okay, welcome count equals to 0, and then I'm gonna add plus. And if you have welcome count greater than 3, I'm gonna say welcome. Right, so how this works is that if you have card changes more than 3 times, you're gonna say, I'm gonna jump out and say, hey, welcome. Right, so let me just remove all this. Right, this is just for cards. And for our cards, we're gonna make some changes over here. So first thing is we still have initialize cards data, fetch latest cards. Yep, okay. And then over here we're gonna update cards data. So this can be simplified to just do this. Okay, we're gonna come over here and say cards data equals to await. Okay, and now we can even have our cards data right inside our component. Let's import writable. And let's see. Okay, fetch. I'm gonna define this fetch over here. Come over here. And I can remove the rest. Okay, nice. Let's see what's missing over here. Okay, this I need to async. Okay, so cards. So now items, we just need to publish events like card changes, right? Okay, and now I think that everything is done, except that we need to now implement. Let me just finish this. Just to know that we have this component, I'll just write this. Okay, so now everything is set up. The only thing that we need to implement is the publish event and the listen. Right, so I'm gonna come over here and have a file called the pub sub. So this is actually a publisher subscriber pattern where the publisher and the subscriber are actually decoupled. They don't know each other. They don't actually know whether anyone is subscribing to a certain event, listening to that event, and doesn't know, and the listener itself has no idea who is publishing this event. So they are doing it anonymously somehow, in a way that anyone can just notify this event, and anyone on the other end can listen and act on it. Right, so we're gonna implement these two functions: publish event. So we're gonna event name, and export function called listen event name, and then a function which is like a listener. So the look of these two functions, you feel like actually they kind of similar to store, in the sense where you listen, you subscribe to store changes, and you get notified, listen to store changes, and when you you change the store, you get notified, and then notify all and all the components that's listening to the subscribe to the store changes and re-render them, right? So this is very similar concept or design pattern, except that it's tweaked slightly to do slightly different things, right? So here I'm gonna publish events from pubsub, and I'm gonna import listen. Whoops. From here, copy this. Come over here. Okay. Let's delete unused file. Okay. So now the thing we need to do is that whenever I click, nothing happens yet, right? I click 3 times, nothing happened yet. I just need to implement these 2 functions, right? Publish event and listen. So here first is you can listen to any events, right? So the event's name is just need to match. So first thing to implement this publisher and listener pub sub kind of pattern, first thing is we need to have a way to record for a particular event name all the listeners. And then when we publish an event, we're going to get all the listeners and notify them. So to have this record for a given event name for all listeners, we're going to use a map to store them. So we're going to call it listener map. Okay. So first is I'm going to check, when I call listen, I'm going to check event listener map that has event name. So if it does not, I'm going to maybe create a set and add it to the map, right? So listener map dot set event name. It's a new set. Okay, now we have it. I'm going to get back this set again. So I do it over here. I check if, so here I make sure that listener.map always have a set now. So that I can come over here and just call this get and add listener. So on the other hand, in publish event, what we're gonna do is we're gonna come over here, get all the listeners for this event. Okay, maybe first is we need to make sure that we have this. If dot has events name, then we're gonna get all the event listeners and say for each listener, I'm gonna call them, right? They are functions. And so let's try this out. So when I click by me, 1 second later, you'll see that the time changes. By me again, 1 second later, the time change. By me again, time change. And by me, you get welcome gifts because you click more than 3 times, right? So now you have a publish and listened. So this is how your components communicate now, right? So your items does not have to know what who is listening and cut changes. You just notify changes, and this is how items can communicate to both the cuts and welcome gifts components. So here you go, right? Hope that this is useful for you. I will paste these 2 repo down in the description so that you can read them and modify as you like them, right? So I think one last thing I need to make sure that this is good for you is that we probably need a function to unlisten, or maybe we can just directly return a function which is to unlisten this event listener, so that when you unmount your component, you can remove from this map of event listeners. So here I'm gonna say listener map. Whoops. Dot remove listener. Okay, be a good citizen. Clean up when you leave. Right. So we return a function to do the cleanup, which is to remove list listener. And in our cuts, we can't return this function, return whatever is written from this listen function directly, because that is the cleanup function. So we return this for the on mount. So so when you on destroy, you will do the cleanup, right? So same thing goes for here as well. Okay, so one tiny detail that you may not notice, but it's important, is that I actually, at the very start of this video, I purposely make this as a separate function as a separate async function. Because if you have an async over here, then whatever you're returning from this on mount is a promise, and promise is not a function. And even if you return this to do a cleanup, it's not gonna work anymore, right? So I purposefully prepared this in a way that this async function is a separate function, so it does not block how we listen to it, as well as it will just make sure that what we are returning is a function. Right, so that's all from me in this video. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, as I said earlier, and share it to your friend if you find anyone that you find that this is useful for them. And as always, subscribe to my channel so that you get notified when the next video is out. So see ya, bye bye!